Welcome back to the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. I am Brian Morgenstern with the great Sam Lyman, here to talk about all that's been going on in the last couple of weeks. The world of Bitcoin has been set aflame in a very positive way. The RNC happened where Donald Trump was nominated and his running mate, J.D. Vance, both of whom are pro-Bitcoin. And then last week was the Bitcoin conference itself, the biggest one yet in Nashville, Tennessee. And President Trump, keynote speaker, first president ever to speak at a Bitcoin conference. And man, did he make some news. It was a biggie. So why don't we dig right in, Sam? Where should we lead off?
Yeah, let's start with talking about the finer points of Trump's speech, including his mention of making the United States a Bitcoin superpower. So an incredible clip here. Dylan, can you cue that one up?
This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done.
There you go.
Yeah.
So there's such a huge contrast between what Donald Trump wanted to do there versus what the Biden administration has been trying to do for the past 4 years. Joe Biden has been trying to drive Bitcoin innovation offshore through a 30% excise tax on Bitcoin miners, prosecution of Bitcoin wallet providers, general crackdown on the cryptocurrency industry. His administration's been doing everything they can to try to drive innovation away. And by contrast, you have Donald Trump, who is promising to make the United States a crypto and Bitcoin superpower of the world. Brian, what are your thoughts on this first part of his speech?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty incredible that he just showed up and said, I'm for you, basically. I want your industry to thrive. I want the U.S. to be leading the world. And he even compared the Bitcoin industry to the steel industry of 100 years ago, or as President Trump says, industry. And so it was really uplifting, positive, optimistic. And like we said, it couldn't be a starker contrast. Really interesting thing, when President Trump filled that room and everybody was, pretty much loving his speech. He got a standing ovation when he said he was going to fire Gary Gensler, the chairman of the SEC, who, of course, has been very hostile to Bitcoin and crypto. He got a standing ovation. He even surprised himself, I think, with that line and the reaction to it. So he went back and said, "Let me say it again. I will fire Gary Gensler." And everybody jumped out of their chairs yelling and screaming. And he goes, "Whoa." Like, he was very surprised by it. So super positive. The contrast with the Biden administration, of course, couldn't be clearer. But we had some conversations while there with two Democratic members of Congress, Ro Khanna from California and Wiley Nickel from North Carolina, both of whom are very pro-innovation, pro-Bitcoin. They don't agree with the administration's approach on these issues. And they, I believe, were part of a letter to the DNC encouraging the party to stop being so hostile to innovation. I think Trump is dramatically moving the needle in the right direction, and it may even be pushing Democrats to embrace Bitcoin and the culture of innovation as well. So very positive development this week, but there was a lot more news in that speech. So what's the next point we should touch on?
Yeah, very positive indeed. Donald Trump also spoke on the critical role that Bitcoin will play in the energy renaissance. He spoke about how much energy he plans to create in his administration. You may have heard him use the phrase before, drill, baby, drill. So on the oil front, he's talked a lot about energy, and now he's relating Bitcoin to the energy renaissance as well. Can you play that clip, Dylan?
But we will be creating so much electricity that you'll be saying, "Please, please, President, we don't want any more electricity. We can't stand it." You'll be begging me, "No more electricity, sir. We have enough. We have enough."
No more electricity, sir.
Please, President, we have enough. Oh, it's so good.
Just the way he says individual words. I think, Brian, your impression of him is really good. But please, and billions, and Bitcoin, and industry. He has his own accent.
He does. He's mesmerizing to watch. I mean, for anybody who hasn't, been in a room with Trump and seen him speak and stuff, like, it's It's such a show. Like a concert. You know, he has greatest hits. Build the Wall, Drill Baby Drill, among others. But this is really positive, and on a the way he said it is hilarious. And I, not to play into the Democrats meme these days, but it's kind of weird, but it's so funny. But it's a critically important issue. So, and the way he talks about it's very funny, but he's 100% right. And actually, there was a really fascinating segment on the All In podcast this last week where Dave Friedberg talked about how the U.S. has to catch up on energy. China is, first of all, they're building coal plants like every day, but they're also building nuclear, and they're now getting much closer to having functional nuclear reactors that can generate 20 megs or 200 megawatts or whatever it may be that are safe, where they have completely solved the question of how to prevent nuclear meltdowns. They're going to be able to create so much energy very quickly, and the U.S. is falling behind. If we want to compete on the data center economy, the Bitcoin economy, AI, whatever it may be, all these important industries for the future, and keeping up, America's economic leadership, we're going to need like twice as much energy as we have. And nuclear is going to be a key. Natural gas is going to be a key. There are a number of things, but the U.S. has to take the handcuffs off ourselves. And we just have to create as much energy as possible. It's the only way that we're going to be able to keep up with China and other economies. So President Trump is 100% right. He understands this. He's met with a lot of the big energy consuming companies, mostly tech companies, and they're telling him that. They're saying the U.S. needs more power to keep up. And we can't be rationing energy. We can't be saying, oh, this person can use electricity, this person can't. That's not how you run a flourishing economy. So on this issue, it is critically important. It's also, by the way, one of the ways you solve the number one issue on voters' minds right now, inflation, is to have cheap, abundant energy. And we all learned that when Russia invaded Ukraine and energy markets were disrupted. What happened? Prices for American consumers skyrocketed very quickly. So we all got a real-time demonstration of how cheap, abundant energy is critically important for keeping inflation down, for maintaining our quality of life, for maintaining our leadership in a variety of industries. And so President Trump is completely right, and I'm very pleased to see him promising that we're going to be begging him for relief from all the electricity. Please, no more. Absolutely hysterical. But on a serious note, he is 100% right, and this is a critically important issue for the country.
Yeah, and again, this is something that contrasts so sharply with the Biden and Harris administration, because Biden, throughout his presidency, has sought to tamp down on who can produce energy. He's been in the tank for environmentalists since day one, and he's been pushing really hard for renewables. And that's not to say that renewable energy doesn't have a place, because it certainly does. But we can build out renewable energy and do so not at the expense of carbon fuels. And I think that's what's critical here. And it's something that Kamala Harris seems intent on continuing the current policy of the Biden administration in the next 4 years of her administration if she were elected. So again, the difference between Trump and Harris on this particular point couldn't be any starker, and it's something to pay attention to. I also admire that Donald Trump recognized the critical role that Bitcoin will play in ushering in that energy renaissance. And Brian, I know that's something you've actually advised the Trump team pretty closely on. And you helped Donald Trump himself recognize that Bitcoin will play a crucial role in helping bring about an era of energy dominance. Can you speak a little bit more on that point, the important role that Bitcoin will play in this process?
Sure. Yeah, it really is an important point. And I know we've talked about it on the show before, but just as a refresher. So Bitcoin mining is a flexible electrical load because the Bitcoin network is decentralized. That means it's maintained by computers all over the world. So if one Bitcoin mining data center shuts off for whatever reason, the whole network is still there. Now think about that in contrast with, pretty much any other data center. If it's holding financial records for a bank, if it's, AWS maintaining business websites, if it's an AI data center, they are required to function 24/7. So they can't just turn off because data would be lost or websites would crash or whatever it may be. Bitcoin network is unique in that way because it's decentralized, and one data center or 2 or 10 or 100 can all shut off and that network still exists. And when they turn back on, it's the same carbon copy of that decentralized ledger. So what that means is that when you're building out capacity, we're all looking to satisfy what we need at 100% demand. When for where we operate in Texas, for example, if it is 110 degrees outside and every single person in the state is cranking up their air conditioning as they should be able to, then, you're going to reach a peak demand. You're going to hit a record for the amount of demand for electricity in that state. Bitcoin mining can ramp down and turn off, or more accurately, the grid operator can use it like a dimmer switch, because as demand is going up, you're actually going to be bringing on more sources of power. So you might have wind, you might have solar, you might have nuclear, you might have batteries, you might have natural gas. Maybe a peaker plant is coming on to meet more demand. So you actually need a demand side load of electricity to balance the grid, to make sure one side or the other isn't overloaded. It's really a balancing act. And Bitcoin miners are the ideal tool for doing that. And in terms of building out the energy infrastructure. So in an environment like Texas, just using that example again, they have abundant electricity about 99% of the time. About 1% of the time is that scenario I described, where you are approaching demand and supply, the axes crossing. So how are you going to economically incentivize more build out so that your peak capacity is much higher if actually you're not using peak capacity all the time? Well, flexible load, who is going to use the stranded power, so that if you're increasing your capacity so that you're going to have a lot more power that's online all the time, but not necessarily used very often, well, you're going to make financing a lot easier. You're going to bring that project online faster. It's going to make economic sense very quickly when you have a load like Bitcoin mining that will essentially use your excess energy, your abundant, cheap energy. They'll pay for it. They'll make the financing work. And then if they need to use that power for air conditioning or whatever it may be, the Bitcoin miners can be like a dimmer switch and toggle down, toggle up, whatever is needed for the grid. So Bitcoin mining is going to be a critically important part for building a stronger electricity grid all across America. And President Trump said it. He said Bitcoin mining is going to help America be energy dominant. I'm glad he said it. He's 100% right. And hopefully it's changing a bit of it's launching a bit of a paradigm shift with regard to these businesses. So that's your little mini tutorial about Bitcoin and energy today. I hope it was clear. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it covers it pretty thoroughly. That's the biggest orange pill for people to take who think that Bitcoin is somehow a burden on the grid. Quite the opposite. It's something that can be used to bootstrap new energy production and make a lot of these projects economically viable. Speaking of orange pills, Donald Trump has clearly taken multiple orange pills over the last few years because he himself used to think that Bitcoin was a threat to the US dollar. It would somehow challenge the US dollar. But now he's very much changed his tune on that specific subject. Dylan, would you mind playing the next clip?
Plan today, I am announcing that if I am elected, it will be the policy of my administration, United States of America, to keep 100% of all the Bitcoin the U.S. government currently holds or acquires into the future. We'll keep 100%. I hope you do well, please.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is a tweet from Pomp. The Pomp says, former President Trump just said those who believe Bitcoin is a threat to the US dollar have the story backwards. The danger of the future does not come from crypto. It comes from Washington, D.C. So he made a really important point here that what is wrong with the dollar? Why have we lost 25% of our purchasing power over the last 4 years alone. It's not because of Bitcoin. It's because of the Federal Reserve printing too much money. It's because of Congress and its reckless spending. It's because of bills like the Orwellian named Inflation Reduction Act, bills that add trillions of dollars to our deficit and make it so Americans' purchasing power is just not what it used to be. Trump now intuits this point, and he recognizes that Bitcoin can actually play a really important role in making the dollar stronger. Brian, do you have any thoughts on this specific point of his speech?
Yeah, I mean, it's he's right, but he evolved on this. He originally viewed Bitcoin as a threat to the dollar several years ago when he first spoke on Bitcoin. Of course, he wasn't really favorable to it. I'm glad he's evolved on this. He's taken advice. He's talked to a lot of very smart people on it. The great Michael Saylor, of course, who is perhaps the greatest ever Bitcoin evangelist in the world, who I had the pleasure of meeting this week, by the way. He's been saying this, and I think he's 100% right. Look, having hard assets that appreciate over time, that are scarce on the U.S. government's balance sheet, does strengthen its resilience and its ability to meet future challenges. And so Trump's right. It's the threat to the dollar. What's been eroding the power of the dollar and the value of the dollar is unlimited money printing and spending money we don't have. I mean, $2 trillion deficits every year were unthinkable just a few years ago. Now they're routine. So that's why, the rampant inflation we've seen is happening. He's obviously correct. I'm not sure how we get out of this, but then enter, of course, the president's statements on strategic reserve of Bitcoin and Senator Lummis introducing legislation to that effect. They believe Bitcoin could actually help us solve our debt crisis. Interesting take, and we can get into that. But point being, the president's right. The dollar has been eroding because of what Washington's doing, not because of what Bitcoin's doing. And that should be obvious to anybody who is thinking about this honestly.
Yeah, and it's very timely as well, because just this last week, the national debt surpassed $35 trillion. We've added just $1 trillion since January alone. So it's accelerating how much debt that we are adding at this point. And no one's really taking seriously this problem on the right or the left. However, like you mentioned, Trump and Lummis are starting to recognize this is a serious problem. What are unconventional ways that we could potentially address it? And one of those ways is, as Michael Saylor suggested, adding Bitcoin to your balance sheet. And Trump promised to do exactly that in the next clip. Do you mind playing that? I was a little early with it at first, Dylan, but yeah, it should be the right one now.
Plan today, I am announcing that if I am elected, it will be the policy of my administration, United States of America, to keep 100% of all the Bitcoin the U.S. government currently holds or acquires into the future. We'll keep 100%. I hope you do well, please. This will serve in effect as the core of the strategic national Bitcoin stockpile.
Wow. So the strategic national Bitcoin stockpile.
Yeah.
In other words, Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. Donald Trump promised that all of the Bitcoin that the United States government holds, which is over 200,000 Bitcoin at this point, we will hold for an extended period of time, as opposed to selling it into the markets, as Germany did just a couple of weeks ago. For those who don't know, Germany owned about 50,000 Bitcoin, and they just dumped it all in the market, causing Bitcoin's price to crash down to the low 50,000s. And of course, people in the Bitcoin community were sitting back asking, what is Germany doing? This is not long-term thinking on the part of the German government. And so Donald Trump is seeing what Germany did and choosing to do the exact opposite and keeping Bitcoin essentially as a strategic reserve asset. Brian, what are your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah. I think he saw what Germany did, and he saw the reaction, which was a lot of face palming, people saying, what are you doing, Germany? And so he doesn't want to repeat the same error. I do think it's funny, the choice of words, because I think it was Senator Lummis's legislation that creates the strategic reserve, but President Trump called it a stockpile. And I can only imagine the conversation behind the scenes when they're deciding how to talk about it. I can just totally see Trump saying, nobody knows what a reserve is. We're going to call it a stockpile because we have stockpiles. We have stockpiles of medical supplies. That's what he was familiar with dealing with COVID. We do have a strategic oil reserve. People know what that is. We have, of course, the gold bullion depository. But I think the imagery of stockpile is probably, something that he knew everybody would understand. It's smart, HODL has been a lasting meme for a decade for a reason. Hold on for dear life. Never sell your Bitcoin. And there was an interview recently with Michael Saylor where I think he was asked on CNBC, what is your exit strategy? And he said, Bitcoin is the exit strategy. You don't sell it. It's a scarce. It's like people who hold on to gold as a hedge against inflation or a stable store of value or whatever. People don't sell it very frequently, and gold is now the number one market cap asset on Earth. And I think if people view Bitcoin in similar fashion, then it makes sense to hold on to it and then transact in other means, or maybe use the Lightning Network if you want to use Bitcoin. But holding on to your Bitcoin is, he's right. That is a mantra amongst Bitcoiners, and it should be the mantra of the U.S. government, and it should have been Germany's, but they made a mistake. We did see the U.S. government moving $2 billion worth of the Bitcoin that it owns just on Monday after the president's speech. So the first business day after his speech, he says, we're never going to sell our Bitcoin. The Biden-Harris administration decided to move a couple $2 billion worth of Bitcoin to another wallet. The price of Bitcoin took a little dip when they did that. I don't think we fully know what it means yet, whether they're about to dump a bunch of Bitcoin, but we hope they don't, because that would be bad for America. But I don't know. I've rambled enough. Those are my thoughts on that.
My understanding with the Bitcoin that was moved is that currently the Treasury has a plan to sell a certain amount of Bitcoin over a 5-year period. So I think it was pre-programmed, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And if the Trump or the Biden and Harris administration attempted to sell all their Bitcoin before Trump is elected, that would be one of those most spiteful moves in American history that would forever sour the Bitcoin community against that administration. So let's hope not that isn't the case. Really fascinating developments on that front, though. And there's something interesting to note that Trump also said is that he believes that Bitcoin will one day surpass gold as a store of value. So that's an extremely bullish thing for him to say on his part. And just for perspective, if Bitcoin today were at the same market cap of gold, a single Bitcoin would be worth about $70,000. In other words, $700,000, which is 10 times as much as it's worth today. Today, it's just a little bit below 70,000. So Bitcoin, according to President Trump, still has a long way to go, but one day will actually surpass gold. I thought that was really interesting. As far as having a Bitcoin strategic stockpile goes, there is a lot of logic behind it. If you consider that we are currently the biggest holder of analog gold in the world, it would only make sense that we would also want to be the biggest holder of digital gold as well. And this has indirect effects in strengthening the dollar. Gold, it's fascinating because the US dollar is no longer tied to gold. It's no longer backed by gold, yet we still accumulate gold. We do that in part because having a good gold stockpile gives people confidence that were there to be issues with the national currency, and if it had to be repegged to something, that gold is always there as sort of a backup asset. So it increases confidence in the US dollar, even though it's not directly tied to the US dollar. I think there's real logic in investing in digital gold right now. In case that we ever reach that same scenario where the US dollar weakens, it has to be pegged to something. Could be gold, could be Bitcoin, could be another basket of commodities, could be all of the above. But there's real economic sense in making this move. So much so that after Trump spoke, Senator Lummis, and you alluded to this, Brian, she announced her own legislation to make Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset. Can you play that clip, Dylan?
Here it is. This is the Bitcoin Reserve Bill. I'm reading from the text. In the Senate of the United States, to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve, a network of secure storage vaults, purchase program, and other programs to ensure the transparent management of Bitcoin holdings of the federal government.
Go. So Senator Lummis has an ambitious plan to accumulate, I believe it was $5 billion in Bitcoin.
I think it was a million Bitcoin
That's it,
she
yeah.
wanted to accumulate. Can we just say for a second, Senator Cynthia Lummis is a delight. She is so enthusiastic, so kind, so willing to talk about new ideas, think outside the box, and yes, to introduce a new potential policy of the U.S. government that would be very good for the country's balance sheet, for our stability in the future. What a wonderful person, and such a great, champion of the Bitcoin community. So we're really grateful for her work on this, and for yours, and for our buddy Pierre's and her staff, Connor Brown and Chris Land, and everybody who works there. They're just really forward thinking and happy warriors on behalf of Bitcoin and all that it can do. So really grateful for her work on this, and the fact that it's in legislative text now, that there will be, hopefully, it'll pass both houses of Congress, be signed by the president, a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the U.S. government. I think it's fantastic. Great idea. She got big applause in announcing it, and we're just really glad that happened. So thank you, Senator Lummis.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. Senator Lummis is such a forward-thinking legislator, and she's effectively orange-pilling a good chunk of Congress right now. And even the President of the United States, she has done really the Lord's work on this subject. So thank you, Senator Lummis, and to all of her staff, really opening the Overton window for people. I think before she introduced this bill and before Trump announced his own strategic Bitcoin stockpile, people were not so certain about this idea because it's so bold, it's so fresh, it's so innovative. And it's because of policymakers like her that people are waking up to the way that Bitcoin could help us address our national debt crisis, the way that Bitcoin could make the US dollar stronger, the way that we could actually improve our own geopolitical position through Bitcoin. So there's a lot of exciting developments happening on this front. And it was a great conference. I mean, it was a blast. We had so much fun there. You had Russell Brand there. You had a whole slew of celebrity politicians, from RFK Jr. To, Senator Haggerty, Senator Lummis, as we mentioned.
Senator Blackburn. Ro Khanna and Wiley Nickel from the Democrat side of the aisle. Vivek Ramaswamy was there, gave a good talk about how Bitcoin really shouldn't be a partisan political football. Same was echoed by Ro and Wiley. Great comments. How many other senators were there? It was action packed. Sam Brown, the excellent candidate for Senate in Nevada and a former client of mine, great guy, Afghanistan war veteran. He was there. Kid Rock, Billy Ray Cyrus.
Billy Ray.
I had a moment that young Brian would have absolutely melted down at. I got to meet Glenn Jacobs, who is mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. He is perhaps better known as Kane from the WWE, superstar wrestler. And I got a chance to chat with him, and what a kind, nice guy. And I think he's going places in politics, actually. I think he he would be a good candidate for statewide office or something even higher than his current station. But he's enormous, and I'm not a very big person. So I'm just glad he was very nice. When I shook his hand, it was like bananas wrapping around my my hand. But really, really kind, interesting guy. Got to chat with him. Yeah, I mean, Senator Haggerty is a complete rock star in terms of championing American innovation. So it was wonderful to have a roundtable with him and discuss a lot of the issues surrounding Bitcoin Ambassador Rick Grinnell was there, you know, being upfront, wanting to learn about all these things and the issues around it. Really pleased to see him. He's a great guy. It was a who's who of politics, which you don't usually expect at a Bitcoin conference. But it was a lot of fun. Really cool stuff.
A lot of fun. I didn't realize that mayor was a former WWE wrestler.
Oh, yeah.
It makes sense. I saw him at an event earlier in the day that he spoke for just a bit on, and I'm thought to myself, that man is massive. And
Yeah.
he was eloquent too. He gave the opening prayer to fundraiser I went to, and I'm like, wow, this guy's, he wants to be something higher than mayor. He definitely has the potential for that. So
Yeah.
I had no idea. Kane from WWE.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's funny that he's becoming more famous for being a politician. I can't believe it. But no, he's fabulous. It was terrific. The only complaints I've heard were that there were a lot of men, which tends to be true of Bitcoin conferences. So the men's room line was long. Kind of a silly complaint. And that it was too Republican. And on that, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the current administration are Democrats, and they're trying to put Bitcoin businesses out of business. Our hope is that it will not be partisan in the future, that this is the opening that President Trump is helping us walk through to see that this is a really powerful voting block of people. We're really passionate. We have a lot of votes. There's campaign contributions, of course. If you want to win your elections, you should be pro-Bitcoin. As Congressman Khanna said, being anti-Bitcoin is like being anti-cell phone or anti-laptop, like in the 90s or whatever. That idea today is unthinkable. It would make no sense. So we think that's what the future holds, that it's not going to be a partisan issue. Unfortunately for now, on the presidential level, it sort of is. So I don't think you can really blame the Bitcoin conference or anybody else for that status, but I do think it's a temporary status and that it'll be more bipartisan going forward. So I don't know. Those are the only complaints, but I kind of dismiss those a little bit and just say that it was a banger of a week. I mean, it was like over 20,000 people, I think, were at the event at various times and in various rooms. I think when President Trump was speaking, the room that he spoke in was at capacity. That was over 8,000, but the rest of the arena had all kinds of overflow rooms all over the place. And I think they were all packed to the gills as well. So really good turnout, people all over the spectrum, political and perhaps otherwise, as Bitcoiners are known to dabble in autism, I guess. Is that how you say it? It's an inappropriate comment. Apologies. I'm not trying to offend anybody. This is about joking in Bitcoin. Anyway, let me stop rambling before I get myself into more trouble. Yeah, great conference.
Great conference. The Trump speech, there was so much excitement for it that he didn't end up speaking until about 3:30 p.m., but there were already people lined up at around 7:30 a.m. There were lines going around the door of this massive convention center in Nashville, Tennessee. So there was so much hype for it. Interestingly, the speech was actually delayed a little bit because of a security concern. And when Donald Trump walked out, he said, before I came out, Secret Service said, "Sir, we're going to need a little bit more time to get things ready for you." And I said, "You take all the time you need." Of course, alluding to his the assassination attempt on his life that just took place at the very beginning of July. And so it's amazing how quickly I believe that event is starting to get memory hold. I mean, in my view, it was one of the most insane, consequential campaign events to happen in the last 50 years. And yet the mainstream media has already moved on to Kamala Harris and whether or not she's brat, which is a Gen Z meme, and just how lovely and amazing and charismatic Kamala Harris is. A complete 180 from what the American public was saying about Kamala Harris over the past 4 years of the Biden administration, where she had some of the lowest approval ratings of any vice president in recent history. So complete change of tune. But speaking of the memory holding of Donald Trump's attempted assassination on his life, we actually saw that Google, whether this was by malice or some other fluke, we're not sure, but they were actively suppressing search results for the assassination of Donald Trump. And so Dylan, thanks for pulling that up. So I checked this as recently as I believe, what's today, Tuesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was as recently as yesterday. I saw a tweet that showed this search result, and I tried it myself, and sure enough, these were the exact same results I got.
Wow.
When you typed in attempted assassination of TR, and it brings up Truman. And
Holy cow.
it makes no sense. And then most attempted assassination, and just completely censors any mention of Donald Trump in the search results whatsoever, which again, this is arguably the most important political story of the year. And yet we're hearing nothing about it. And contrast this with another search result from Google when you type in DEI, why DEI is important to society, important in the workplace. And then you, to their credit, have one result out of 1, 2, 3, like 8 that says why DEI is bad for business. But then all of this propagandizing saying that DEI is good. So whether this is the algorithms just doing their thing or evidence of actual bias within the Google workplace is uncertain, but in the very least, it's concerning. Brian, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, that's really concerning. And in 2020, when everything was going on, we saw the most publicized example of this throttling was Twitter, kicking President Trump off. We saw some financial censoring of, bank accounts being closed for certain PACs and events and things like that. But the silent censorship that Google has been engaged in, I do think is a huge cause for concern. And this is like such a blatant violation of public trust, in my opinion. And look at what they just got caught doing with their AI function, where you would, try to create or ask for an image of founding fathers, and you couldn't find a white person. Like, you're memory holing white people? Like, I mean, what on earth are you doing? Like, accuracy should be the number 1 through 100 priority if your business is search, because people are searching for the correct results, not what you want the results to be, the correct results. So this is really infuriating and is just another example of like thumb on the scale of politics. Like that image of President Trump coming up after having been shot and his fist in the air and saying, fight, fight, fight. I mean, it was a heroic thing to see. As Zuckerberg said, like, it was the most badass thing ever. It just happened. Like it is. So you might not like Donald Trump. That's okay. You don't have to like him. But to then suppress the fact that that event happened and try to erase it from people's memories, I mean, that's just Orwellian. That is like some Soviet behavior right there. And it has to stop. Like, we've got to just expose this stuff and shame them until it stops. I don't know if it ever will, but we can't stop trying, because this is just so inappropriate and un-American. It's really infuriating.
Yeah. If they don't stop themselves, hopefully the market corrects them. I don't know about you, but I've all but abandoned Google in the last year, not only because of its politics, but because its product sucks. Google's not what it used to be. I almost use ChatGPT exclusively now to search out answers to the questions that I'm doing research for. So a lot could change in the next year. Let's hope it does, because as you said, Google, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they are more or less the American Pravda today. They're carrying the water for an administration that doesn't want people to know the truth, doesn't want people to know that our current president has been senile and really not capable of doing his job for at least the last several months. So it's a lot of cause to feel disillusioned, but let's move on to lighter things. I feel like we've kept it pretty positive and upbeat. And one quick reminder, if you like what you've seen here today, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's go to our grab bag section to close things out today, Brian. We had a really fun interaction run-in with Tucker Carlson and Don Jr. this week. You want to talk about that?
And Kim Guilfoyle. Yep. So do you have that?
Yeah, we got a clip.
Teed up? Okay. So why don't you show the clip, Dylan, and then we'll explain what happened.
We're going to do a groupie video. Yeah, we are. We just commandeered this bus. We commandeered the bus. Our ride disappeared on us, and we jumped on this bus. They gave us a ride to dinner. Thank you, everyone. Hey, you Bitcoiners are wild.
I love the Bitcoin.
Thank you, guys.
What won't you?
Nothing. I like this.
Sorry.
So we saw Tucker in the lobby. I had the wonderful opportunity to speak with him last week in Milwaukee, and then saw him again and chatted for a second in the lobby. And then he and Don Jr., who I've also had the pleasure of speaking with several times, they're really friendly, great guys. They have the reputation of these like fire breathers, but I've always found them to be very nice. We chatted with them for a little bit. Then we were getting on our bus to go to a dinner event, which was awesome, called Beefsteak, where you just put on an apron and eat meat with your hands for several hours. Very fun. Anyway, we were on our way to Beefsteak, and Tucker and Don Jr. and Kimberly Guilfoyle were standing out front of the hotel waiting for their ride. Apparently their ride just, whatever happened, canceled, didn't show up. So they were on their way to their dinner event and they needed a ride. So they just kind of hopped on our bus and they're like, can we have a ride to dinner? And our whole group was like, yeah, sure, of course. So they came on, they took pictures with people. They were very friendly and chatty and great. And we dropped them off at their dinner. They were extremely grateful and kind. And and then we went to Beefsteak and ate meat with our hands. It was the most surreal, ridiculous night ever. And what made me really happy was looking around the bus at some of our colleagues' faces. And it ranged from like just utter shock to like pure joy, like lighting up from ear to ear with a smile. So hilarious and very funny. And we were glad that we were able to give Tucker and Don a lift and Kim a lift to dinner. So very weird, very funny thing. You never know what's going to happen at the Bitcoin conference. I think that's the takeaway. Next year's, by the way, will be in Vegas. So if you think Nash Vegas was crazy this year, just wait for Las Vegas next year at the Bitcoin conference. Who knows what's going to happen? Lots of fun.
Yeah, lots of fun. Truly a surreal experience just seeing Tucker Carlson and Don Jr. knock on the door of your bus and asking for a ride. My favorite part was when Don Jr. said, "You Bitcoiners are wild."
Yeah.
You couldn't imagine a more buttoned up group of Bitcoiners than that party bus. Like we're all members, employees of a NASDAQ traded company. You know, Brian, like you're wearing a suit coat right now. So it was, I thought that was a pretty good line because you think we're wild. You should see Bitcoiners who aren't like us. That's another breed. Yeah. So,
yeah, for real. That we talked about it in our last recording, which I don't even know if we posted yet, but we did from the conference. Yeah, where we saw a guy look like Little John, a guy dressed in a Dogecoin full bodysuit. We saw, people draped in orange from head to toe. You name it. It was, a bunch of wacky, wild people. But hey, I'll take it. Maybe we got a little edge. Maybe we're the bad boys of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Just concealing it. But thanks everybody for watching. Remember, hit like and subscribe. Follow us on social media at MorganSternNJ, at SamLyman33. Reach out to us, DMs, say what you like, what you don't like, ask questions. We will be back very soon. But thanks for tuning in to the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod.